Hi, everybody. Hello there. Hello. Hi there. Welcome to my live stream. We're going to talk about the Kristin Smart murder trial. So I'm going to give you some things that you might be curious about regarding this trial. It's an interesting one. It's an unusual murder trial. So I'm going to talk to you about 5 things that I think are pretty interesting about this case, just to start with, okay, regarding the trial process. So please hit that like button. Please subscribe to this channel. Say hello in the chat box. And if you want to participate in the chat, I'll be looking at your questions. You do need to subscribe. So please subscribe so you can participate in the chat. Please hit the like button. Let me know that you're there. Hello, hello. I know this is a last minute live stream, but I thought it might be a good time to talk about the Kristin Smart murder trial. Okay, so who am I? My name is Michelle Hagan. I'm a legal analyst and I'm a former prosecutor. I'm also a former prosecutor of domestic violence. And you may recognize me because I provided a lot of legal analysis on the Elizabeth Holmes case. So I wanted to do this live stream to kind of preview at least 5 things that I think are pretty interesting about this case. And like I say, it's a very unusual murder trial. Why? Because we have no body. Kristin Smart has never been found. She's been missing for 26 years. Hi, Hugo. Nice to see you. So please put your questions in the box. Hit that like button. Okay, so let's talk about Kristin Smart. She was a 19-year-old college freshman. It was towards the end of the school year. She went to a party. It was an off-campus party. She was a student at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, which is approximately 4 hours south of San Francisco. It's, I think it's west of Bakersfield. It's down the central coast of California. It's a beautiful campus. Anyway, she was there attending college and she disappeared. No one has seen her for 26 years. Nobody has seen Kristin Smart for 26 years. Her body has never been found. She went to this off-campus party. There are witnesses who testify in the preliminary hearing, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that, that said that they walked her home. 2 of them had left her alone with Paul Flores, and Paul Flores is currently charged with her murder. He's a defendant along with his father, Ruben Flores, who is charged with being an accessory, helping his son, Paul Ruben, hide the body, allegedly. Now, this is a murder trial without a body, so it's quite unusual. And it's taking place, the trial is taking place in Salinas, California, not in San Luis Obispo. And I'll talk to you about why that happened. It's going to be a trial by jury, and in fact, 2 juries, and I'll talk to you about that too. And Paul and Ruben are being tried separately. Paul went to college. He was one of the college students, fellow college students with Kristin Smart, and he's being charged with her murder. Okay, so let me go ahead and give you some additional information. The trial is not going to be televised. However, the public can attend. There is limited seating for the public, and there's an overflow courtroom or an overflow room that will have seats for the public and for the media as well. Okay, so she's been missing. Kristin Smart has been missing since 1996. So that's 26 years. Nobody has seen her. Okay, so Paul and Ruben, the defendants in this case, were arrested in April of 2021. So what is that? From 96 to 2021, that's what, 15 years later? 25 years later, they're being arrested regarding her murder. Okay, so why is it happening in Salinas, California, not in San Luis Obispo? What that's called, it's called a change of venue. So in other words, the trial was moved from San Luis Obispo, which is where Cal Poly is, which is where the alleged murder occurred. It was moved to Salinas, California, in Monterey County. The reason it's called a venue change, the reason they move trials is because of the publicity. Kristin Smart, her whole disappearance, her missing, everything that's been going on in this case has gotten a lot of publicity. And it's gotten a lot of publicity in San Luis Obispo, where the alleged murder occurred. There's been billboards, there's been fundraising, a lot of people have been looking for her. So in order to give, the defense brought this motion to move the case from San Luis Obispo to Monterey. And the reason they wanted to do that is they wanted to make sure their defendants, their clients, got a fair and impartial jury, right? Because if there's a lot of high publicity, you would assume that the jurors know, prospective jurors would know a lot about this case. So they moved it to Monterey County. They moved it to the Salinas courthouse. So why are there going to be two juries? So there's going to be two juries sitting simultaneously in this trial. So the jury that's going to be assigned to Paul Flores' case, he's the one that's charged with murder. He's the one that was last seen with Kristin Smart walking her back to college campus. So he's going to have a jury of 12 plus 8 alternates. And then there's also going to be the jurors assigned to Ruben Flores' case. They're going to be the ones deciding whether or not Ruben Flores helped his son hide Kristin Smart's body. Okay, so there are also going to be a panel of 12 that are going to be assigned to Ruben's case, 12 plus 8 alternates. So we're going to have 40 jurors sitting in this case, listening to the testimony. 2 juries, one assigned to Paul, 12 plus 8 alternates, and 1 panel assigned to Ruben's case, 12 plus 8 alternates. Okay, so the reason there's separate jurors is because there's some evidence that may be incriminating to either one. So when that evidence comes up in the trial, that jury, the other jury, will be excused, right? So they're only going to be hearing evidence relating to their defendant, hearing evidence relating to Paul Flores, and hearing evidence relating to Ruben Flores. Okay, so if Paul Flores is convicted and it's a criminal case, so it has to be a unanimous, all 12 jurors have to decide that he's guilty of murder. If he's convicted of murder, he's looking at 25 years to life. Ruben Flores, the father, who's charged with being an accessory after the fact, helping Paul hide the body, apparently, allegedly under Ruben's house, under the deck, and I'll get to that in a second. If Ruben Flores is convicted, he's looking at up to 3 years in prison. Okay, so separate panels, but they're going to be hearing the same evidence, only the evidence relating to their defendant. Okay, so, and again, it's an unusual case because we have 2 juries, we have them being tried separately, we have a murder case with no body, no remains. Her remains have never been found. I mean, it's a terrible tragedy. It's a terrible loss to her family. So the jury process is starting this week. So they've called up, they have summoned, the court has summoned 1,520 jurors to show up for jury duty. Again, hit that like button, show that you support this channel. So 1,520 people are showing up as the potential jury pool in the Kristin Smart case. So why did they call it 1,520 jurors? Because this case has gotten a lot of publicity. They're trying to find jurors who can be fair and impartial. They also need to find 2 separate panels, right? So they have to find 40 jurors. So this week, they're starting with the juror questionnaires. In other words, there have been written questions that the jurors, prospective jurors, are given, this pool of 1,520 jurors, questions they're being asked that they have to fill out and answer. Those answers are going to be given to the defense attorneys, the attorneys representing Paul Flores, the attorneys representing Ruben Flores. They're going to go through those written questionnaires, those written responses that they've gotten from the jurors, and they're going to be screening them to find out if these jurors can be fair and impartial, what questions they need to ask, whether these jurors have any hardships or reasons they want to be excused, because then they can get rid of those jurors, right? And then they can get to the next process, which is where they ask these individual jurors questions, each side. The defendant will ask, the defendant's attorneys representing Paul Flores will ask jurors. The defense attorneys representing Ruben Flores will ask jurors questions, okay? That's the voir dire process. Right now, we're in the questionnaire process. So each side, after the defense attorneys and the prosecutors go through the questionnaires and figure out who needs to be excused because they can't be fair and impartial or they have hardship, then they have what's called voir dire, when the attorneys can ask the jurors questions, particular questions relating to their answers and to make sure that these jurors can be fair and impartial. Okay, so hit the like button, and if you guys have any questions, please put it in the chat box. I want to know what your questions are, and let me know if this is making sense, okay? And by the way, if you want to contribute to me making these videos, I did put a PayPal link in the chat box as well as in the description box below the video. So please say hello. I see that people are there. Please say hello, you guys. Go to the chat room and say hello and ask me a question. It'd be great. I'd be great to hear what your questions are. Okay, so we've got 2 jurors, 2 defendants. We have a case without any eyewitnesses to the murder. We have a murder case with no body. We have a father and son being accused. Okay, and we have 1,520 jurors showing up as prospective jurors in this case to be screened and to be chosen as jurors. All right. So when they get to the voir dire process, when they start asking the individual jurors questions to find out if they can be fair and impartial, how much do they know about this case? Did they know Kristin Smart? Did they know any of these witnesses? Did they go to Cal Poly? Have they ever sat as a juror before? Do they believe the testimony of a witness? Do they have any background as an expert in soil? Because there's going to be cadaver dogs who followed scents to find out where her body could be or where any of her DNA or anything that connected Paul Flores to her murder. They also have soil samples. They have experts who testified in the preliminary hearing that say that they looked under the deck of Ruben Flores' home and they found that the dirt had been moved, the dirt had been dug up, and there are soil samples to say, according to the prosecution, that there was a human body buried under the deck of Ruben Flores' home. So in other words, the prosecution is alleging that Paul murdered Kristin Smart in his dorm room when either he was during the process of a rape or an attempted rape. Then he, with his father, hid the body under the deck of his father's home. That's what the allegation is from the prosecution. Okay. So is this making sense? I hope this is making sense. All right. So during the jury screening process, so when they get to voir dire, when they can start asking questions, each side gets 20 preemptory challenges. So that means the defense attorneys representing Paul Flores and the defense attorneys representing Ruben Flores each get 20, it's 10 preemptory challenges each side. So, in other words, I'll get to your question in a second, Polka Dot. Hang on one second. So, in other words, each side has 10 challenges. In other words, they can excuse 10 jurors without any reason. So, they can just ask the court to excuse. So, they can challenge 10 jurors, each side. So, that's 20 jurors they can challenge total, okay, to eliminate off the jury panel as they go through and they ask questions. All right, so let me get to Polka Dot's question. He or she is asking, is there enough DNA in the soil samples to determine whether it belongs to Kristin Smart? Good question. Very good question. So is there enough DNA in the soil samples to determine whether it belongs to Kristin Smart? Well, I'll tell you I'm trying to catch up on all these facts. As much as I know at this point, the DNA that they did find, they don't have the DNA that ties it to Kristin Smart, as far as I know. But they do have blood samples. Apparently, some amount of blood samples that show that it relates to a human. And there has been expert witness testimony in the preliminary hearing, which is what happened when they had witnesses come forward, testimony come forward, and evidence that the prosecution presented in order for the judge to make a determination that there was enough probable cause to charge Paul Flores with the murder, and there was enough probable cause to charge Ruben Flores as an accessory after the fact. So the prosecution put on witnesses, the people that were at the party, who saw Paul at the party, saw Kristen at the party, the people that partially walked Kristen back to the dorm that were with Paul and Kristen. Those two other people testified. They put on experts to say that the soil underneath Paul Ruben's home had been dug up just prior to them being arrested back in April 2021. And they did find samples of blood, and they did apparently have what's called, I think it's called corpse wax, which is how do I explain this? It's a mummified material that happens when a body is basically buried in soil and exposed to moisture. So according to expert testimony, there definitely was a human buried underneath that deck. The question is whether it was Kristin Smart, okay, and whether it relates to Ruben Flores and to Paul Flores, okay? So you see that this is an unusual case, and it's not an easy case for the prosecution, right? Because typically in a murder case, you have the body, okay? You may not have eyewitnesses to the murder, but you would have the body or have more traces. And what we do know in the preliminary hearing was that there were cadaver dogs. And cadaver dogs alerted on Paul Flores' dorm room separately. So these two dogs independently alerted that there was some human remains or some human material that was in Paul Flores' dorm room. Okay. But there was still no DNA to connecting it to Kristin Smart at this point that I know of. I don't know what's going to happen at trial, but as far as I've been able to read on this and research it, that's what I found out so far. So 2 independent cadaver dogs. Then we also have cadaver dogs who also noticed and alerted, I guess we could say alerted, to the area underneath Ruben Flores' deck, which is what the connection was to checking out, investigating the soil, and then discovering that there had been blood samples and the soil had been disturbed underneath the deck. Okay. And that's what the investigation has shown so far. Now, we don't know if it's going to be the same witnesses and more evidence or more witnesses that are going to testify at the trial. All right. So any questions, put it in the chat box, hit that like button. do subscribe to this channel. So you need to subscribe if you want to participate in the chat box. And go ahead and ask your questions. Come on, you guys. You got to be curious about this. So go ahead and ask questions. Again, she was a 19-year-old freshman at Cal Poly College in San Luis Obispo. She disappeared. It was on May 25th, 1996, and no one has seen her since. And her body hasn't been found. There hasn't been any remains found. It's a tragic, tragic loss to her family and to the community of San Luis Obispo. And in April 2021, the police arrested two people. They arrested Paul Flores, who also attended Cal Poly and was also seen with Kristin Smart that night, and apparently was the last person that she was with that night. He was also, according to one of the witnesses at the preliminary hearing, he was seen in her dorm room prior to this several times. And he was seen at the party that she also attended. And apparently he gave some testimony, some statements to the police that are incriminating to him, as well as his father apparently made some incriminating statements. Now, whether or not those statements come into the trial, we're going to find that out. Okay, so let me see. How many witnesses approximately will the prosecution call? Well, good question, Hugo. There were a lot of witnesses at the preliminary hearing. We had the police officers. We had the two people. There was Cheryl and Tim, who walked Kristen partly home after the party. So those two, plus there's several people at the party who testified. There's the experts relating to the cadaver dogs. I don't know the number. I assume it's over 20 witnesses, at least. Okay, let me see. Odd they would have to hide a body on the dad's property. Yeah, well, people do strange things. They would hide the body. The question is, how did he get the body? If, as the prosecution, I think this is what they're alleging, and again, this is just my opinion, based on the information I read, I could be wrong, is that if he killed her in the dorm room, how did he get her from the dorm room to his father's house, right? Did anybody see them together at the dorm that morning? It was after apparently 2 a.m. on May 25th, 1996. Are there any witnesses there? Has anyone come forward relating to that? Okay, could multiple bodies have been buried there at one time, i.e. one or both of Flores could have been, that's a terrible thought. Could other bodies? I don't think there are multiple bodies. I think there's only one. I think it's an outline, apparently, based on the wax, the corpse wax that when the body mummifies. I think it only indicated one body imprint. Yeah, it's a terrible, terrible thing. I mean, there are things about Paul Flores. Apparently, when they did a search of his home, they found some videos that he had taken of him raping and sodomizing women. There are also other witnesses out there other victims out there, I should say, who allege Paul Flores of rape. Now, the prosecution in an earlier motion has requested that in this trial, they be allowed to bring in testimony of allegedly prior rapes. At this point, the judge has ruled that any of those sexual assaults or rapes that may have taken place regarding Paul Flores and other victims are not going to be admitted in this trial at this point. Okay, so it's based on the testimony of the witnesses, who saw them together, what evidence they found in the soil, what evidence they may have found in his dorm room, as well as his car. Apparently, I think his car, there was a Volkswagen that I think was also confiscated and searched. Okay, a circumstantial case could be difficult to prove. Yeah, no kidding. Good call, Randy. Randy. A circumstantial case could be difficult to prove after 26 years, even with such damage. Yeah, no kidding. And again, it is a circumstantial case, but circumstantial cases are proven every day. Defendants are convicted every day on circumstantial because, especially in murder cases and rape cases, there typically aren't witnesses. There aren't eyewitnesses, right? So it's going to be based on the soil samples, the blood samples, the cadaver dogs, the connection of the two of them, seeing them together. He was the last person with her, allegedly. Yes, and especially without a body, it's not easy to prove. All right, so let me talk to you about some other things. There is the charges. Okay, so in California, we have murder charges and we have a couple degrees of murder. So there's first degree. Paul Flores is charged with first degree murder. So what's unusual about this murder charge, it's called, and again, hit the like button, it's called a felony murder rule. So you can be charged with murder in California if a killing results during the commission of a murder. So there's only two ways to get to a murder one charge. Either it's premeditated murder. In other words, he planned it, and then, he premeditated killing her. Or there's what's called felony murder rule. Now, if you kill somebody during the commission of certain felonies, you can also be charged with first degree murder. He is being charged, Paul Flores is being charged with first degree murder because the prosecution is alleging that he killed her during the commission of a rape or an attempted rape, which is a felony. So if a killing occurs during the commission of a felony, you can be charged with first degree murder. Now, how are they going to prove it was a rape or an attempted rape? I guess we're going to find that out. Maybe it has to relate. Maybe there's some evidence that will be presented at trial, some DNA evidence, something that connects it to a rape or to Kristin Smart being in his dorm room or in his car or being buried under that house. Okay. So that will be very hard to prove. Yeah. Well, getting a jury, because I've tried a lot of cases, to get 12 people to agree, it has to be a unanimous verdict. And when you don't have a body, maybe the defense will get one or more jurors who won't convict Paul Flores. So, it all comes down to the evidence here, the circumstances relating, who else? What else could have happened to her? Now, in the preliminary hearing, that was interesting. In the preliminary hearing, the defense doesn't put on a case. It's the prosecution putting on a case. And basically, the defense asks, in cross-examination, they have the opportunity to test these witnesses, test their memory. This was a party. Were they drinking? What did they remember? Are they sure it was Paul Flores that was at the party? All of those kind of questions. So they have to convince 12 jurors to convict. So it isn't an easy case. But again, we don't know what all the evidence is. So during the killing during the commission of a felony, during the rape, if you kill somebody in California, you can get charged with first degree murder. Okay, so the father. Now let's talk about Paul Flores' father, Ruben Flores. He's charged with being accessory after the fact. That means, was he involved in hiding her body? Was he involved in any way in the murder? And if he's convicted, and again, his jury has to find unanimously that he's guilty and he's convicted. If he's convicted, he's looking at 3 years in prison. Okay, so Polka Dots has a question. How long will the voir dire process take? Well, good question. So looking at the trial schedule, the court has allocated at this point, they're going to be doing jury selection regarding Paul Flores' case during the week of June 20th. The following week, June 27th, that week, they're going to be doing jury selection, in other words, voir dire, of Ruben's potential jurors. My guess in this case, it's probably going to take longer than a week on each one of these. And if you think about, I think it was the Scott Peterson case, I think it took them 42 days to get a jury. So I don't know if 5 days for each panel is enough, but we'll find out. I think in the jury questionnaire, which is what they're going through this week, I think that's going to screen a lot of these jurors. In other words, eliminate a lot of the jurors that can't be fair and impartial or have other reasons why they cannot sit as a juror for hardship, financial hardship reasons, or other commitments. So the fact that they called up so many jurors indicates to me that this judge wants to expedite this. They're going to get all these people there at the courthouse. They're going to go through them with the juror questionnaires, and they're going to ask them questions, right? In voir dire, each side will ask, and then they'll be able to pick a juror, I think, a jury much quicker that way. So I would say at this point, the judge is allocating, the court's allocating a week per panel, per defendant. I think it's going to take longer than that because this case, for those of us who live in California, and, I remember this case. I remember her being missing. I know there's been a lot of publicity. I know there's a lot of people that are concerned, and want justice in this case. A lot of people in San Luis Obispo, her family, I'm sure, a lot of her loved ones, they want to find out what happened here. One way or another, I'm sure that's what the ultimate, outcome's going to be, for the prosecution to put on the case and to see what happens. Not an easy case, but I don't think it's an easy case for the defense either, right? So, especially if statements come in that incriminate each one of these defendants. All right, so are both being tried together? Yes. It's going to be one trial with two juries. One jury related to Paul Flores, the murder charge. One jury related to Ruben Flores, the accessory after the fact charge. Both of those panels are going to be sitting in the courtroom during the trial. Okay? They're only going to be excused when it's evidence relating or incriminating to the other party, right? So if evidence comes, they're only going to be sitting relating to evidence relating to their case. So the bulk of this trial, the bulk of the evidence and the witnesses, both jurors will be there, both panels. Okay? So they're going to be tried, both of these defendants will be tried together. All right, so let's talk about the preliminary hearing. So in other words, that's the process. You could call it a mini trial. So that has already taken place, but it doesn't involve a jury. It's where a judge made a decision to hold both of these defendants to trial. It's called a probable cause hearing. In other words, did the judge find that there was enough evidence to know that a crime had been committed? And was there enough evidence to suspect or to find that each one of these defendants committed it? So the judge found that there was enough probable cause to believe that Paul Flores, I'm sorry, I keep saying his name wrong, Paul Flores committed the murder of Kristin Smart. And the judge found that there was enough evidence to find that Ruben Flores was an accessory to this murder. So the next step is the trial, which is what is going on now. We are in the initial phases where we're trying to pick a jury, right? Where both sides are trying to pick a fair and impartial jury to hear the evidence to determine, was Kristin Smart murdered by Paul Flores? And did Ruben Flores, was he involved in this murder as well as an accessory after the fact? Was he involved in hiding her body? Okay. So here's another thing that's interesting about this case is the verdict. So if we have two jurors sitting in this trial, what happens if one of these jurors comes to a verdict? So they put on all the evidence, right? The prosecution goes first. They put on their evidence, they put on the witnesses, they put on the experts relating to the cadaver dogs, relating to alerting in Paul Flores' dorm room, relating to the soil samples underneath Ruben Flores' deck. They put on all that evidence. The defense, of course, cross-examines all these witnesses. Then the defense puts on their case, whether or not Paul Flores will testify, whether Ruben Flores will testify. I don't think so at this point. I don't think either one of them are going to testify. I think this case is going to be about cross-examination by the defense. When each one of these witnesses that the prosecution puts on in cross-examination, the defense is going to test their memory. Well, you were drinking that night, right? Are you sure Paul Flores was at the party? Are you sure there was Kristin Smart? All those kind of questions, right? Are you sure that he said he was going to walk her back to her dorm room? Did you see Paul Flores in her dorm room? Are you sure it was him? Are you certain it was him? When you didn't come forward and testify for 20 some years, right? There's a witness who, one of the witnesses the prosecution put on in the preliminary hearing was a good friend of Kristin Smart's, and he testified in the prelim that he saw Paul Flores several times in Kristin Smart's dorm room prior to this happening, right? Prior to her disappearing, prior to the date of this party. But he didn't come forward at the time, apparently. It was years later that he was interviewed by the detectives, okay? So those kind of things. Maybe the defense is able to show that the jury shouldn't believe these witnesses. Maybe there's ways to discredit these witnesses' testimony. Maybe there's ways to keep certain evidence out at the trial, right? That's the kind of case this is going to be. It's a case, on my opinion, it's cross-examination and how much evidence they can get in by the prosecution, how much they can tie it to Paul Flores and to Ruben Flores. I don't know what all the evidence the prosecution has at this point. Okay, so regarding the verdict, so after the prosecution puts their case on, then the defense puts their case on. Then there's rebuttal witnesses if the prosecution wants to rebut anything that the defense put on in their case. Then there's closing arguments, right? We start with opening statements. Then we start with the testimony and the witnesses by the prosecution. Then we have the defense's case, rebuttal case by the prosecution and also by the defense if they have to rebut each other's rebuttals. And then we get to closing arguments. Then the jury is instructed on what the law is, what the role is as jurors. Then the jury goes and deliberates. What happens if Ruben Flores' jury reaches a verdict before Paul Flores' jury reaches a verdict? Interesting question, right? So what happens if Paul Flores' jury reaches a verdict before Ruben's jury reaches a verdict? What happens then? Both of these juries are going to be deliberating separately, right? They're only going to be deliberating regarding Paul's murder charge and Ruben's accessory charge. So what happens if, I'll get to your question in a second, Jay Randy. So if Ruben's jury comes back with a verdict before Paul's jury does, that verdict is sealed. That jury will be excused, right? They'll be let go. They have to come back. They'll come back to the courtroom when Paul's jury reaches a verdict. The verdicts will be read together. They'll be read at the same time. Okay? So that jury, whatever jury finishes first, will come back, be in the courtroom. The verdicts will be read at the same time. Okay? So let me see what Jay Rainey says. What happens if the jury finds Ruben guilty? Good question. But Paul's jury does not find him guilty. That is a very good question. Yeah, an accessory to what? Well, that's an interesting question. Well, an accessory to a crime, I think, that's something that's definitely going to be a question for an appellate lawyer, which I am not. So that'll be interesting. But you know what? I have a strong suspicion in this case, strong suspicion that there might be a strong suspicion here that there might be a conviction on both counts. I don't know where. I'm just based on my years of trying cases. I think, that I know it's a bit out there with, but there have been many cadaver dogs testifying in murder cases. It's just, it's kind of like when you have your child, right? You've just baked a bunch of cookies or even chocolate cake, right? And you see crumbs all over the place, but you don't see your son or daughter eating the cake. But yet you can conclude that your son or daughter probably ate the cake because there's cake on the face, there's crumbs leading to their bedroom. That's your classic circumstantial evidence hypothetical, right? Well, in this case, he's the last person, Paul Flores is the last person seen with her. Last person. He's seen in her company prior to this. There's statements that were made incriminating each other, apparently. There's witnesses that put Paul Flores, I'm sorry, I keep saying his name wrong, Paul Flores with her, right? And no one has seen her for 26 years. And her mother testified in the prelim. Kristin Smart's mother testified in the prelim. And her father testified in the prelim that they had a close relationship with her. They talked to her regularly. She was also in contact with her siblings. And suddenly she disappears. Suddenly disappears. No one sees her. The last person that's with her is the defendant, Paul Flores. Question, Matthew Basketball. What is the advantage for the defendants to be tried together? Well, that's a good question. The advantage is, as far as the court's concerned, is you don't have to use the resources of the court twice. The other advantage is, for the prosecution, possibly, is that you're setting up the scene of what happened. Paul apparently was with her. He's charged with murder. The soil's dug up under his father's house, Ruben's house. I think there's possibly some DNA in Paul's, I think he had a Volkswagen Cabriolet car. So the advantage is, the resources of the court. Secondly, it's a fair proceeding in the sense that the bulk of this evidence relates to both of them, right? It's only a question of whether there's any incriminating statements that come in that may impact, or statements that aren't admissible, that for a short period of time, one of the panels has to get up and leave and then come back in. Maybe it's for resource reasons, but again, the judge has decided that these cases are going to be tried by two juries listening to the same evidence, mostly the same evidence, and those two juries are going to decide the evidence relating to whichever defendant they're assigned to, whether they're assigned to Paul Flores in the murder charge or whether they're assigned to Ruben Flores on the accessory charge. Another advantage could be, the jury gets the whole picture here, right? Sees all the evidence, except for whenever the judge excuses them for whatever reason, relating to certain evidence. So we'll find out. It's going to be a very interesting case. Okay, so just to give you the schedule here. So we have they are right now, the jurors are filling out all the questionnaires or have filled them out. The written questionnaires asking them questions relating to, do they know about this case? What do they know about it? Can they be fair and impartial? Did they go to Cal Poly? Have they ever testified before in a case? Have they ever been a victim of rape? A victim, attempted rape? Have they ever been a victim of violence? All those kind of questions to figure out whether or not a juror can be fair and impartial. Okay, so that's what's going on this week. They are screening all those questionnaires to find out whether or not a juror needs to be excused because they can't be fair and impartial. They have said they can't be fair and impartial. They have a financial hardship reason. They have other commitments. They can't sit. Those jurors will be eliminated. Then the next stage will be starting next week, apparently according to the court schedule. Each side will then get to, each one of the defense attorneys representing Paul Flores, representing Ruben Flores, and the prosecutor will then get to ask each one of these jurors independently, based on their answers on the juror questionnaire, whether or not they can be fair and impartial, or any other additional questions they may have relating to whatever answers these jurors filled out in their juror questionnaire. Okay? Then they get to make preemptory challenges. So each side gets 10 challenges to 10 jurors, prospective jurors. So they get rid of those 12 jurors that they challenged, right? And that's also, prior to that, the judge will be eliminating any jurors that have a bias. They know about this case. They can't be fair and impartial. If they have a bias for any reason, those jurors will be eliminated too. So then we get rid of the 20 that had been excused by each side, 10 for Paul Flores' jurors, 10 of those can be excused. And then 10 regarding to Ruben Flores, the jurors can be excused. So each side gets 10 preemptory challenges. So I guess that would be 40 jurors. I'm sorry. We're going to get potentially as preemptory challenges, 10 for each side for each panel. Okay, I hope this isn't getting too complicated. Could the defendants request? Yes, they could have requested separate trials. Yes, but why? Why would a judge grant a separate trial? So in the Elizabeth Holmes case, right, she requested a separate trial because she claimed that Sunny Balawani was abusive towards her. And that would impact the fact that she would be sitting in the same courtroom with someone who allegedly abused her. That would impact her ability to have a fair and impartial jury, right? So she was granted a separate trial. In this case, what could either one of the defendants have said that would have allowed a judge to give a separate jury? Well, neither defense attorney asked for a separate trial, I should say. Neither defense attorney asked for a separate trial. So these are consolidated, right? It's relating to the same event, consolidated, and they're going to be tried together. It's not uncommon, right? These are basically co-defendants in a way, right? Except Paul's charged for murder, Ruben's charged for accessory after the fact. So because the bulk of the testimony, the evidence relates to, is the underlying elements of each one of these charges, they're going to be tried together, tried jointly, okay? But they each get their own panel of jurors to determine whether or not they're guilty or not of the charge, okay? So I hope that's making sense. All right, so the trial schedule. So this week, they're going to go through the jury questionnaires and screen jurors, eliminate jurors based on their answers on the juror questionnaires. Then they're going to ask their voir dire questions of each of these jurors. Then there's going to be opening statements that are going to start, at this point, scheduled to start July 6th. Opening statement for Paul Flores. So the defense attorney representing Paul Flores will get up and make their opening statement. The prosecution will make their opening statement regarding Paul Flores. The defense will make their opening statement regarding Paul Flores. The following day, there'll be opening statements relating to Ruben Flores. So the prosecution will make their opening statement regarding Ruben's case. The defense will make their opening statement regarding Ruben's case, the defense. Okay, so how long is this trial going to last? At this point, it's scheduled apparently through October. So looks like the trial is going to go through October. So hit that like button. Please subscribe to the channel. Please do share this video. And if you want to contribute to me making these videos, I put a PayPal link in the chat box as well as in the description box below the video. Okay, so any other questions? So Matthew Basketball, do they have special courtrooms to accommodate multiple jurors? Yeah, they do. But in this case, what's happening in the courtroom is going to be, they're going to be using one courtroom, and it's Department 4 in the Salinas Courthouse. And by the way, the public can attend because courtrooms are public, okay? So there will be a limited number of seats allocated for the public and for the media. All right, so I think there's only 5 seats for the public, 5 for the media. Then they're going to have the jury panel for Paul Flores and the jury panel for Ruben Flores. Those seats will be taken up by those jurors. And then it looks like there's 5 seats for the public and 5 seats for the media. However, the court's going to have an overflow courtroom. So it's going to be televised to the other courtroom, that whichever one the judge determines, whichever extra courtroom that's going to be. So if you want to go and watch the trial, you can go to the overflow room, okay? Though I'm sure there's going to be reporters and media people there as well as the public in the overflow room. And how is that going to be determined? I think it's probably going to be first come, first serve. So I imagine people whoever line up in the morning before court. I think court starts at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. You would line up, and then what they did in the Holmes case, because I got up very early, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., to get into the trial, the court will probably be giving out badges or tickets to assign you to either the courtroom, Department 4, where the trial is taking place, or the overflow room. It depends. Depends on how many people show up. But keep in mind, this trial is not going to be televised. It's not going to be live streamed. It's only going to be the court. The judge is only allowed one camera to take still photographs in the courtroom. So it's not going to be televised. It won't be live streamed. So the only way you can watch this trial is either you go to Department 4 and you get one of those seats, if you're one of the lucky people, or you go to the overflow room, okay? And you can watch it live there. And I'll do my best to keep up on this case. And, maybe I'll show up. Maybe I'll be there live in person. We'll see. I'm looking at my schedule. So, okay. So any other questions? Does anybody else have any other questions? Any questions before I sign off? So again, she's been missing since 1996. They have not found her body. The prosecution is charging Paul Flores with first-degree murder because it was a killing during the commission of a felony. The felony is, as the prosecution alleges, a rape or an attempted rape of Kristin Smart. Apparently, I think they're alleging that it took place in his dorm room. He attended Cal Poly with Kristen. He is seen several times prior to this with Kristen. He attended the party that night, the off-campus party, where he was with 2 other people that were walking Kristin Smart back to the Cal Poly dorm. He was left. He was the last person seen walking with her. Last person seen walking with her back to the dorm at Cal Poly campus. 2 cadaver dogs independently alerted on his dorm room. They arrested Paul Flores and his father, Ruben Flores, in April 2021, based on whatever evidence they found, because there was dug up dirt underneath the deck of Ruben Flores' house. And apparently, experts have testified in the preliminary hearing that there were samples in that dirt in the soil of a human body which the prosecution alleges was Kristin Smart. So, this is going to be a very interesting case, and it's an unusual murder case because usually you have the body, but there's plenty of witnesses that tie at least them together for a period of time. Now, it's a question of whether or not any statements, other incriminating statements, or any other evidence comes in that ties Paul Flores to the murder and Ruben Flores to accessory to the murder. So this trial will be really interesting. I hope Kristen will get justice finally. I hope so too. Polka Dot, I hope so too. I hope the family gets some closure here. I hope we find out what happens. This has been a long 26 years. Paul Flores, I think, is 45 years old now. His father is 81 years old. And this was 1996 that this alleged murder occurred, and no one has seen her since. And interesting, in the preliminary hearing, the defense tried to show, when they were asking her parents questions in the preliminary hearing, didn't she want to go to Thailand? Didn't she want to study in Thailand? Didn't she want to become a model and study in Thailand? In other words, she took off. This is not a case about murder. It's a case about a runaway. She wanted her own, she just left. It's not a murder case. It's a case about a runaway. Is that really what this case is about? I guess we're going to find that out. It's a fascinating case. And again, it gives me an opportunity to teach you more about the American justice system with all my experience and all my analysis. Okay, so hit that like button. Please do subscribe to this channel. Please share this video and hit the bell notification if you want to keep up with all of my videos that I'm posting. Let's see, what else? Oh, and if you want to contribute to me making these videos, I greatly appreciate it. I put a PayPal link in the description box below the video and in the chat room. So thank you to all of those of you who've joined me. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time. Thank you for supporting my channel, by the way, to all of you analyzers. I greatly appreciate your support as I grow this channel and as we grow this community. So thanks again, everybody. Have a good week. See you at the next video.